I see periodically for sale beginner witch kits. Apparently Sephora had some. I know that there's a lot of witchcraft shops that sell these. I know that back when I was a baby witch, a lot of the books that like introduced you to Wicca and witchcraft and paganism would have a list of supplies in them. So I decided I should make my own selection of supplies you should pick up early. And the reason I'm making this, beyond thinking it's a smart idea, is also that it's common for experienced witches to say that the magic is in you and not the tools, and remind you that a painter's skill is not in the brush. But as any artist will tell you, having a shit brush makes it harder to do good work. And while a magnificent artist can take a crayon off the street and some eggs and make a masterpiece, they're hamstringing themselves. When you're learning, you need to learn from okay tools before you learn how to use crap tools or even excellent tools. So with those in mind, that concept in mind, let's look at what I would give to a baby witch. On a kind of top level, all of these tools are things that are going to be easy to source and cheap and not necessarily witchcraft only. Because what if you decide in 6 months that witchcraft isn't for you? I don't want you to have dropped $200 on a wonderful crystal ball and a grimoire made of calf skin and baby teeth. First, most important, a notebook. Witchcraft is a trade, it's a skill you gotta learn, and a good source of learning is keeping track of your own work. You can use a notebook to take notes for the books and classes that you're reading and taking, and to write out prayers and write out rituals, to test out sigils, to plan things, to make notes of what worked and what didn't. A little notebook is wonderful. Number 2 is a knife. This doesn't have to be a fancy knife. This knife obviously is kind of nice and not designed for kitchen use, but a kitchen knife works great. What you want is something that can carve into a candle, something that can cut a plant, something that can cut a cord, and something that communicates what a blade communicates. I wouldn't use safety scissors for your witchcraft knife, for the simple reason that no one's afraid of it, and sometimes you are using a knife to be intimidating. Third most important, a reusable lighter, a refillable lighter. You're gonna light a lot of candles and a lot of incense and a lot of herbs and a lot of papers full of petitions or of people's names that you hate, and it's just easier to have a lighter that you like and to have a lighter that fits your hand real well, and if it's refillable, you can keep using it. This is the first of these slightly witchy picks, but a fireproof container. This buddy in particular is a miniature Dutch oven, but really it just needs to be something that can withstand heat, and then at the bottom of it, you can either set it on top of something that will also withstand the heat, like a trivet, or fill the bottom with sand or rocks to help contain and dissipate the heat. You're gonna light stuff on fire, you want something that can let you do that safely. I do like a cauldron because they have a lid, so if the fire gets too big and you get stressed out, problem solved, no more fire. Another slightly witchier item is a wand. Wands don't really have a practical use, so this does kind of sit out of my main selection of tools, but it is one of the most stereotypically witchy, wizardy, magical items. It's one thing to stand and open gates or close gates or direct energy with your body, and it's another to do so with a prop. There's an element of magic that is psychological. Even if you believe in magic, like most witches, like me, there is an element and a layer that will be added if you feel confident and you feel magical. And having a wand, I think, is just the easiest way to get that magical feeling, because, as you can tell from this little spoon, it doesn't need to be an expensive piece. It is a more magical only tool, but you can get one from outside, from the ground. And then you want some kind of raiment. I'm using this robe that I made as my example, but it could also be a piece of jewelry, a ring, a pin, a scarf, something that you can put on during a ritual to signal to yourself that you're in ritual mode now. You are doing ritual, you are doing witchcraft, and similar to the wand, which helps put you into that theatrical mindset, as you do magic more and more often, wearing your fancy piece of raiment, your fancy piece of garb, your fancy jewelry, as you continue to use this nice stick in ritual, they will help you slip into the desired state faster. You will become a more powerful witch wearing them. And finally, these are, I usually don't think of them as tools, but rather supplies, but you need stuff to actually do your magic. So, a divination tool of some kind. I've got a tarot deck, but it could just as easily be runes, it could just as easily be a pendulum or a lucky coin that you flip, just some way of telling the future or contacting things that aren't you, or understanding yourself better. You may not like divination, so I don't recommend you spend $75 on the fanciest tarot deck you can. I recommend you look at the existing divination methods and find one that kind of makes sense to you or kind of looks interesting, and pick a kind of cheap one. That way you can test it out. Maybe you're really not a tarot person. My partner isn't. They're really a runes person. Maybe you're really not a pendulum person. I'm not. But you do need some kind of divination tool in your back pocket, and you want one early. The other thing you're gonna want is rocks! You want some cheap rocks early on in your practice, because crystals are used so often in spell work that if you've never used a crystal, it's gonna hold you back. This is really the Gen Ed course of spell supplies. I recommend clear quartz, rose quartz, and amethyst because they are so easy and cheap to find. That's basically it. You can go to any gift shop in like mountains, you can go to most stores. I guarantee you all three of these now are $5 tops, and they do cover a lot of uses that you would want. Amethyst for psychic ability and for sleep and for rest and dreams, rose quartz for love and self-love, and then clear quartz for basically anything and amplifying other energies. Another easy tool you can pick up pretty much anywhere is a cup. A cup is simply a vessel. It doesn't need to be a fancy-ass chalice. It can be used to hold water that you're scrying in. It can be used to hold offerings that you are making to other people or other energies, and it can be used to hold the potion that you are enchanting to drink yourself. It's just a useful little guy to have. This one I got from a thrift store. They don't need to be fancy. Then we have candles in a variety of colors. Just like a little set of these very short tapers in a bunch of different colors will let you do a bunch of candle magic. There's very rarely a situation where a candle is not a useful part of a spell. There's all of the aesthetic cord cutting rituals on TikTok. There's always addressing a candle in a million different herbs and how dramatic and beautiful that is. And there's also just having nice mood lighting in your ritual. I don't have any with me because they're all up in my kitchen where they belong, but I would put a handful of kitchen-y herbs into your beginner witch kit. Specifically rosemary, lavender if you can find it, but that's not really a kitchen, that's more of a nice smelly herb. Basil, thyme. Just grab some nice herbs. Then my final supply that I think you need is a tiny sewing kit, which I'm representing by pins and needles and a little bit of thread. Because poppets are nice, and sachets are nice, and it's good to take a number of supplies and put them into a cloth pouch. Put a tiny little home sewing kit into your witchcraft box. Once you've collected all of these, I would focus then on finding cute bits and bobs. Acorns from a tree that you really like, fishbone that washed up on shore, a piece of charcoal from a ritual fire that you enjoyed, a postcard that reminds you of a force of nature that you work with. Find a variety of things. Start acquiring things that have a lot of personal meaning to you that don't necessarily show up in the witch kit. These sorts of items are pieces of power for you. Witchcraft for me is very much about my relationships with things and about my power and what feels powerful to me, and therefore having these little bits and bobs is more effective than having 10,000 crystals that I'm never going to use because they don't make sense to me, or 10,000 herbs that I'm never going to use because I'm not familiar with them. So that's my witch kit and my priestess kit. Here are the items. I will throw a list of them into the description of this video. Thank you for watching. I post about once a month, sometimes even more, about witchcraft, priestessing, pagan culture, cooking and crafting and lifestyle vlogs, all from a pagan perspective. Follow along, comment, smash that like and subscribe button. Anything you do keeps me going and keeps me thinking that this was a worthwhile hobby to get into. This has been Kate Bogg, one of many lanterns. Keep on shining.